What would it look like to be the strongest weightlifter in the world? And how about doing it at the age of 19? This might just be the strongest any teenage weightlifter has ever been. But what's interesting is that even though in this training session he smashed the world record, I think he could have done significantly more. How much more? Well, let's work it out while we watch the strongest training session from a teenager ever. Karlos Nasar, the weightlifting prodigy from Bulgaria, competed one final time as a teenager here at this competition, the Last Chance Olympic qualifier. A competition he showed up to in what I can only describe, having now been involved in the sport for over a decade, as unreasonably good shape. It was a good job we were filming a documentary with him at the time. Stay tuned for that at Weightlifting House TV. It's worth remembering that Karlos is known as a clean and jerk specialist. He'd set 4 world records in the lift at this point, but nothing in the snatch, except of course for 5 junior records. But we're comparing this guy with men. You can't really compare him with his peers. And so when, in the morning, he told me that he was going heavy, and he said that he would snatch 178 to 180 kilos, 180 being the world record by Lee Dae-in, the world number 1, I had a sense that this was just Karlos being Karlos, a cocky 19-year-old. Like that time when he told me he'd snatched 189 kilos in training. I mean, really? To be fair, he did also tell me that if you take Lee Dae-in's snatch and add it to Tien Tao's clean and jerk, you get Karlos Nasar. And though that sounds arrogant, he technically sells himself a little bit short there. Karlos held this training session later in the day, and those who were in the training hall at the time, a mixture of athletes, coaches and media, definitely sensed the electricity in the air. A nervous energy, but only from our side of the cameras. Watching him build up in the snatch towards 180 kilos, 396 pounds, was amazing. Of course, at the time we were unaware of this levelling up that he'd experienced since the European Championships. It wasn't only amazing in terms of the way that he was lifting, the laid-back energy he was putting into weights that caused his contemporaries to brood in total focus, and it wasn't a technique either. More on his technique later in this video. I think it was the way that he carried himself under so much pressure from everybody else watching. When I first met him, he was 17 years old and just as good. I mean, he beat Liu Xiaojun's clean and jerk world record at 17. But he was pretty shy at the time, and for good reason. I mean, he was a 17-year-old breaking world records under the lights. It almost felt embarrassing, like, who was this physical phenom we were watching? It was totally bizarre to see a 17-year-old outlift the most famous weightlifter of the 21st century. Fast forward 30 months to this training session, and he seemed a lot more comfortable with the eyeballs and the cameras, almost welcoming. Since 2021, through watching him from the commentary table to seeing him in training halls and even then working with him more closely in perfecting our Weightlifting House knee sleeves, we've watched him grow into the lifter that he is today. He's actually 4 versions of our knee sleeves in now, by the way, and he swears by them. We've been iterating and iterating based on his and a bunch of other elite lifters' feedback for a couple of years now, and we have finally perfected them. These sleeves that he's currently wearing are the penultimate version, and they're much more powerful than your normal knee sleeves. These are made much more with the idea of allowing a weightlifter to just immediately squat more or stand up cleans quicker, rather than just keeping your knees warm. And we're going to launch this final product in a couple of weeks, which we are of course really excited for. If you're wondering why in this training session he only has one on, that's actually a great illustration into how Karlos Nasar is, into his mindset. It's the biggest training session of the week, and he just leaves one knee sleeve back at the hotel. Kinda like how before clean and jerking the 223 kilo world record in Doha, he was running around trying to find a belt because he'd left his belt at the hotel. He doesn't concern himself with the smaller things that might throw off other athletes. He isn't tied to anything other than his own abilities. No, it might not be perfect to only have one knee sleeve on while demonstrating being the strongest teenager ever, but he doesn't let it get to him. He doesn't form a total reliance on his equipment. After all, as our singlet strapline goes, it's who's in it that counts. I'll link down below to the weightliftinghouse.com store, because over the years we've developed an insane range of incredible equipment that has supported the performances of so many of our favourite weightlifters, and I know a lot of you are looking to improve your own training and want to use equipment that you have visual evidence of that works, which we obviously have in abundance now. Also, we're giving away house straps for every order over a certain amount this week only. My team and I who develop our products are extremely proud of the range and the constant improvements that we make on them with the help of athletes like Karlos. It's no wonder that the training halls were covered with Weightlifting House in Thailand. So get your free house straps this week and check out the range at weightliftinghouse.com. The link is down below. Funnily enough, I spoke with Miso Hisona a few days ago, Qatar's first ever Olympic champion, whose early career sort of resembles Carlos's rise, to a lesser degree. He told me that he liked watching Karlos more than anyone at the moment, not because of his technique, but because of his showmanship.
Nasar, the atmosphere that Nasar puts in the competition is beautiful. I'm not talking about technique. His show is really remarkable. Like he gets really good crowd.
He engages us in his story. It's true. The 180 kilo snatch is ridiculous because he misses it and then in under a minute, genuinely, he's back and strapped up to the bar again, and before you know it, standing it up. He just equaled the world record in the training hall, the most any 89 kilo lifter has hit, in the training hall. With a nonchalance that must have been terrifying for the other 89s who saw the footage that spread across social media in the hours that followed. He really was backing up his claim that he is what happens when you put Li Dayan's snatch with Tian Tao's clean and jerk. So it was Tian Tao's turn next. And in the clean and jerk, Karlos began building, a master in the lift. And here's the interesting bit. Yes, he might jump forwards a little, and yes, he leans his shoulders really far back in the finish. He's not even physically the strongest in the category, but he is a master of how he utilizes his lower body. I'll let my good friend, and of course elite level coach and founder of Weightlifting AI, commentator Max Aita, explain it from a section of our most recent podcast.
You look at Karlos and like the bar is super close.
Yeah.
He moves his knees back super well off the floor.
Yeah.
He shifts them under really far. He
really
hops
far
forward, but like the only thing about Karlos, if you cut off his low, like
yes, you said this at the camp.
Blocked off his upper body, and you only saw his lower body, you'd say that knee movement is incredible.
Yeah. Like
he gets his legs back and under and extended. There's no way he's lifting the weights he is without having some level of efficiency because he's not the strongest guy.
He's not. He can't squat as much as Kadamar, Tian Tao, Nino.
It's impressive.
What happens here in the clean and jerk portion of this training session still goes down as one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen, and truly is something I think only Karlos Nasar can do. In fact, it's this portion of the training session that really makes this session an historic one. He was split jerking, as usual. He'd said to me that he was hoping for 215 to 220 kilos, more than we've seen from him in a training hall session. His world record is 223. He was also jumping up in weight in a surprisingly measured manner, from 180 to 190 to 200 kilos. But if you watch the 200 kilos closely enough, you'll see his back foot flicker when he splits, the tiniest of movements. Enough, though, for him to gesture that it had slipped. And so with that as the backdrop of the clean and jerk session, what happened next blew all of our minds. The first thing he did was to load up a 20 kilo jump rather than a 10 kilo jump. I think that goes down as just Nasar things. But then he decided, because of the slippy platform, to power jerk. His coaches afterwards told me that they had absolutely no idea he was going to do this. In fact, I get the idea that they have very little idea whatsoever about what he's going to do. Sometimes I'm not even sure he does. And I want to explain the feeling in the training hall a bit more. There's a moment when you see something like a 20 kilo jump to a weight that's already 10 kilos higher than we've seen from anyone in this category, in this sort of context, where you want to acknowledge with everybody around you about what's happening, but you daren't in case you infiltrate the athlete's consciousness. You want to make sure everyone realizes that they are about to see something that hasn't been done for decades. A 400 kilo total at under 200 pounds. but you can't risk them breaking their focus, reconsidering their decision, or questioning themselves in any way. And so you sit there, bottling up all of this intense anticipation inside. It's probably the closest that most of us will ever get to this level of virtuosity. To see it, but not be able to engage with it fully, you just have to let it happen. And so he cleans 220 kilos, a 20 kilo jump, something no other 89 weightlifter in the world would attempt. Even Tian Tao, arguably the best cleaner in the world back in his heyday. And then, out of nowhere, he attempts a power jerk. Most of you watching train and do some form of weightlifting, you know what it's like to switch from one type of jerk to another at a top weight. Oh no, wait, of course you don't, because no one ever does that. He missed, but he did lock out. Then, after a couple of minutes of rest, he went right back to the bar. And not only did he make it, but he totaled 400 kilos, 4 kilos over the world record. With a variation, he doesn't even train. The strongest I think any teenager has perhaps ever been. So not only did he back up his statement about being what happens when you mix Li Dayin's snatch with Tian Tao's clean and jerk, he even switched to Tian Tao's jerk to prove it. But what could he have done? How much more could he have lifted? If he hadn't slipped and decided to split jerk, his preferred method of jerking, then what? 225 kilos? 230? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, I know, but he told me that he made over 230 kilos multiple times before in training. And then a couple of weeks after this training session, he hit 226 kilos for an unofficial world record in competition. So what could he have done on this day? A 405 total? 410? You tell me. You can get free house straps this week only at weightliftinghouse.com with all orders over $80, £70 and €80. Pick up the best training equipment available in weightlifting at weightliftinghouse.com. Trusted by the best in the world.